The air in the grand conclave chamber was a solid thing, a crystalline lattice of silence and ancient fear. It was an atmosphere sculpted by millennia of ritual and the weight of countless civilizations resting upon the shoulders of those gathered within. High Arbitrator Valerius of the Xylos stood upon his floating dais, his multifaceted eyes absorbing the shimmering, holographic sphere of data that hung in the chamber's cavernous center. The sphere depicted a single, solitary vessel, an anomaly of such profound wrongness that it felt like a blasphemy etched into the sacred fabric of spacetime. The ship was human, and it was a violation of every principle the conclave held dear. Around him, the delegates murmured, their thoughts and soft-spoken words weaving a tapestry of rising panic. The Cathar Imperator, a being of obsidian carapace and barely contained aggression, radiated waves of contempt. His species understood only strength and the clarity of overwhelming force. This human ship, with its chaotic energy signature and blatant disregard for the covenants of cosmic temperance, was an insult that demanded a violent answer. Valerius focused his gaze on the datasphere, filtering the raw information through his species' innate sense of cosmic harmony. The Xylos did not see technology as mere machinery. They saw it as an expression of a species' soul, its inner logic made manifest. The ships of the conclave were elegant, their energy profiles as predictable and gentle as a rising sun. They moved through the void with a grace born of the rules, the hard-won wisdom that had ended the great extinction wars and ushered in an eon of fragile peace. The first rule, the principle of measured potential, dictated that a vessel carry only the energy required for its stated purpose. A diplomatic courier should not possess the latent power of a fleet destroyer. This ensured transparency, prevented escalation, and made intent clear across the vastness of space. The human ship, the Vigilance, spat in the face of this rule. Its power core bled energy into the void, a roaring, untamed inferno of potential that dwarfed a Cathar battlecruiser, yet it sat passively, claiming to be on a mission of first contact. It was a lie so audacious it bordered on madness. The second rule, the sanctity of inertia, was equally fundamental. A ship's transition into and out of faster-than-light travel had to be telegraphed, a slow and observable process that gave all parties time to react, to question, to de-escalate. It was the foundation of strategic stability. The humans had arrived without warning, tearing a hole in spacetime as if the universe were a cheap fabric. They had not arrived. They had simply appeared. The violence of their entry had sent shockwaves through the local sensor nets, an act of such profound arrogance that even the placid Luminians, beings of pure thought, had stirred from their contemplative silence. They were here now, and no one had seen them coming. It was the act of a predator, not a potential partner. And the third rule, the covenant of silent running, was perhaps the most sacred of all. It governed the emissions of a ship, ensuring that no stray signal, no harmonic frequency could be mistaken for a weapons lock or a targeting array. It was the rule that prevented misunderstandings from spiraling into system-wide conflict. The Vigilance, however, did not run silent. It screamed. It broadcast a constant, chaotic wash of multi-spectrum energy that was not communication, not sensor data, not anything the conclave's most brilliant analysts could decipher. It was just noise, a pointless and aggressive cacophony that jammed local channels and felt, to Valerius's sensitive Xylos perceptions, like a continuous, grinding threat. It was the technological equivalent of a constant, unending war cry. "They mock us," the Cathar Imperator's voice boomed, a guttural translation resonating from his personal podium. "They come to the very heart of the conclave, to the citadel of Concord, and they display their contempt for the laws that hold the galaxy together. This is not ignorance. This is a challenge, a declaration that they are above the wisdom of 1,000 species, of 10,000 millennia of peace." He gestured a clawed appendage at the datasphere. "Look at it, that thing. It is not a ship. It is an aberration, a weapon disguised as a diplomatic vessel. Its very existence is an act of war. I say we answer it as such. We will unmake this vessel and send its wreckage back to their primitive star system as a message." A soft, chiming voice countered his. It was the Lumina Prime, its form a swirling vortex of light contained within a crystal shell. "Violence is the language of the desperate, Imperator. It solves nothing that wisdom cannot solve with greater permanence. We do not know their intent. To assume malice is to project our own fears onto them. Perhaps their technology is simply unrefined. Perhaps they are. Children stumbling into a galactic society they do not yet comprehend, making noise because they do not know how to be quiet." The Lumina Prime's logic was sound, yet it felt hollow to Valerius. He had studied the fragmentary data the Conclave had gathered on humanity. They were not children. They were a young species, yes, but they had risen to technological prominence with terrifying speed. Their expansion had been explosive, a wildfire consuming their corner of the Orion Arm. Such a species did not build ships like the Vigilance by accident. Unrefined, the Cathar scoffed, the sound like grinding stones. Lumina Prime, your philosophy is a luxury born of a peace we warriors have secured for you. That ship's power core could crack a moon. Its drive ignored the fundamental laws of causal transition. Its emissions are an active jamming field. This is not the work of naive children. This is the calculated design of a species that has only ever known conflict. They have built a ship for a galaxy where there are no rules, because they intend to be the ones who make them. The chamber fell silent as the Imperator's words settled. The fear was palpable now. The Conclave was old, its member species ancient. They had forgotten the taste of total war, of the existential dread that came with a truly unpredictable foe. They had wrapped themselves in the comforting blanket of their rules, believing that logic and order could tame the inherent chaos of the universe. The humans, with their single, terrifying ship, were threatening to pull that blanket away. Valerius felt the weight of his office settle upon him. As High Arbitrator, his was the final word. He could cast the deciding vote that would send the combined fleets of the Conclave against this lone human vessel, potentially igniting a war with a species they knew almost nothing about. Or he could counsel patience, and in doing so, appear weak, indecisive, and risk the very real possibility that the Cathar were right, that the Vigilance was the harbinger of an invasion, a wolf in sheep's clothing waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He let his gaze drift from the Cathar to the Lumina Prime, and then to the dozens of other delegates, the silicon-based architects of the GNR, the aquatic telepaths of the Signian Veil, the stoic, crystalline sentinels of the Shard Collective. They were all looking to him, they were all afraid. For days they had debated. For days the human ship had sat there, unmoving, its chaotic energies a constant, screaming insult to their entire way of life. They had laughed at first. The initial sensor readings were so absurd, so far outside the established norms of starship engineering, that the Conclave's technical committees had assumed they were errors. A power signature that fluctuated with no discernible pattern. A drive system that left behind quantum foam instabilities. A communications array that broadcasted pure, undirected static. The delegates had shared what passed for smirks and chuckles in their varied biological forms. How primitive, how brutish. Like a child banging pots and pans together, demanding attention. The laughter had faded as the data was confirmed. The ridicule had curdled into suspicion, then into dread. No species could be that incompetent and still achieve interstellar travel. The chaos was deliberate. The question was why. "They have sent a message," Valerius said, his own voice calm and measured, cutting through the tense silence. A simple, formal request for diplomatic dialogue. It was encoded in the universal mathematical language, a gesture of peace. It is the only part of their presence that adheres to any known protocol. "A deception," the Cathar Imperator roared. "They offer a hand in friendship while holding a blade behind their back. We are not fools." "Nor are we murderers," Valerius countered, his voice hardening slightly. "We will not be the first to fire a shot. We will not be the ones to turn a potential misunderstanding into an interstellar war that could claim billions of lives. We are the Conclave. We are defined by our wisdom, our patience, our adherence to the very rules we believe they are breaking. If we abandon those principles at the first sign of a challenge, then the rules have no meaning, and we are no better than the barbarians you claim they are." He let his words hang in the air, a final, definitive statement. "We will grant them an audience. I will open a channel. We will hear what they have to say." The Cathar Imperator clenched his claws, his mandibles clicking in fury, but he did not protest further. The authority of the High Arbitrator was absolute in moments of crisis. The decision was made. Valerius took a slow, calming breath, a habit of his species when faced with profound uncertainty. He felt as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, about to step into a fog from which his civilization might never return. With a simple mental command, he instructed the Citadel's communication hub to establish a secure, real-time link to the human vessel. The great datasphere in the center of the chamber shimmered, the chaotic representation of the Vigilance dissolving to be replaced by an incoming visual feed. The moment of truth had arrived. The image that coalesced on the sphere was not of a snarling, brutish warrior or a wild-eyed fanatic. It was a man, old by his species' standards, with graying hair and a face etched with lines of what seemed to be calm thoughtfulness. He was dressed in a simple, dark blue uniform, adorned with no weapons or ostentatious displays of rank. He sat at a plain table in a room that was starkly functional, its gray walls unadorned. Behind him, there was only a simple window showing the starfield, and the distant, glowing majesty of the citadel of Concord. The contrast between the man's serene appearance and the violent chaos of his ship's energy signature was so jarring it was almost disorienting. "I am Ambassador Aris Chen of the United Nations Solar Mandate," the human said, his voice even and uninflected, translated instantly by the conclave's linguistic engines. "On behalf of humanity, I extend greetings to the assembled members of the conclave. We have traveled far and we come in peace." The sheer audacity of the statement, given the nature of his vessel, sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the chamber. Valerius silenced them with a gesture. "I am High Arbitrator Valerius," he replied, his own voice resonating with the formal tones of his office. "Your arrival has been noted, Ambassador. Your vessel is a source of great concern to this body. It violates the foundational covenants of cosmic temperance, laws that have maintained peace in this galaxy for longer than your species has existed." Ambassador Chen nodded slowly, his expression unchanging. It was not a look of guilt or surprise. It was a look of understanding, almost of weary anticipation. "We are aware that our starship design philosophy differs from yours. It is for this reason we have come, not to challenge your laws, but to explain our own. Words, I fear, will be insufficient. The principles upon which the vigilance was constructed cannot be easily conveyed through dialogue alone. Therefore, I extend an invitation. Send a delegation to our ship. We will show you everything. We will answer all of your questions. We wish for there to be no misunderstanding between our peoples." The chamber erupted. The Cathar Imperator slammed his fist on his podium, shouting that it was a trap, a foolish risk they could not afford. The Signian delegates swirled in agitated patterns, their collective telepathic consciousness projecting waves of alarm. To board a vessel of such unknown and threatening potential was madness. It would be giving the humans hostages, willingly walking into the predator's den. The very idea was anathema to every security protocol the conclave had. But Valerius saw something else. He saw an act of profound confidence. The humans were not hiding. They were not being evasive. They were opening their doors. They were inviting scrutiny. It was either the most cunning trap ever conceived, or it was an act of genuine transparency so radical it was beyond the conclave's current comprehension. His own logic, the very core of his Xylo's being, told him that a being intent on deception would not invite its potential victim to inspect the instrument of that deception. He felt the precipice again, the fog swirling around his feet. The choice was his. To remain here in the safety of the citadel, surrounded by the fleets of the conclave, armed with suspicion and fear, or to take that step to accept the invitation and to face the unknown with open eyes. The future of galactic peace might depend on it. "I will accept your invitation," Valerius announced, his voice cutting through the clamor. The chamber fell into a shocked, profound silence. "I myself will lead the delegation." The Cathar Imperator stared at him, his obsidian eyes wide with disbelief. The Lumina Prime pulsed with a soft, approving light. Valerius looked at the serene face of Ambassador Chen on the viewscreen. For the first time, he thought he saw a flicker of something in the human's eyes. It was not triumph. It was something closer to respect. "Prepare a shuttle," Valerius commanded his aides. "We are going aboard the Vigilance." The journey across the void from the citadel to the human ship was a study in contrasts. The Xylo's diplomatic shuttle was a work of art, its hull flowing with bioluminescent patterns, its interior a symphony of polished woods and soft, harmonious chimes. It moved with a silent, effortless grace. The Vigilance, as they drew closer, was the opposite of grace. It was a monument to brutal functionality. Its hull was a patchwork of dark, non-reflective plating, angular and severe. There were no elegant curves, no aesthetic considerations. It was a machine built for a purpose, and that purpose was clearly not to be beautiful. It was larger than it had appeared from a distance, a hulking mass of metal that seemed to absorb the light of the nearby star. And the feeling of it was a dissonance in the fabric of space. The shuttle's sensitive instruments registered the chaotic energy bleeding from the human ship not as a steady hum, but as a discordant, arrhythmic thrum, a constant pressure against the hull. Valerius was accompanied by a small, carefully chosen delegation. The Cathar Imperator Grask had insisted on coming, his honor demanding he face the potential foe directly. He stood now in his gleaming battle armor, a silent, menacing presence. Beside him was the Lumina Prime, its crystalline form a beacon of calm logic in the growing tension. And there were two of Valerius's own Xylo's aides, their minds linked to his, recording every detail for the Conclave archives. As their shuttle approached the designated docking bay, a section of the dark hull slid open with silent, perfect precision, revealing a brightly lit chamber within. The docking procedure was smooth, the magnetic clamps engaging with a soft thud that belied the ship's intimidating exterior. The moment the airlock hissed open, the difference was palpable. The air inside the Vigilance was cold, sterile, and smelled of ozone and recycled oxygen. It hummed with a low, powerful vibration that resonated deep in Valerius's chest cavity. It was the feeling of immense contained power. The walls of the docking bay were bare, gray metal, crisscrossed with thick power conduits and data lines. There was no art, no ceremony. Standing there to greet them was Ambassador Chen and a handful of other humans in the same simple, dark blue uniforms. They were not armed. Their faces were composed, their postures relaxed but alert. High Arbitrator Valerius, on behalf of my government and my crew, I welcome you aboard the UNS Vigilance, Chen said with a slight formal bow. Your welcome is accepted, Ambassador, Valerius replied, his multifaceted eyes scanning every detail of his surroundings. Your vessel is formidable. It is functional, Chen corrected gently. Every element of its design is dictated by necessity. Please follow me. We will take you to the bridge where we can begin our explanation. He turned and led them into a long, gray corridor. The design was relentlessly utilitarian. The passages were wide enough for heavy equipment to be moved, the lighting was flat and even, and the deck plates were scarred with the faint marks of use. This was not a vessel for dignitaries. It was a workplace. Or a warship. Grask the Cathar rumbled beside him. This ship has no soul. It is a cage of metal and power. I do not like it. The Lumina Prime chimed softly. It has a soul, Imperator, a soul of pure, unadorned purpose. What that purpose is, we have yet to learn. They passed crew members in the corridors, men and women of varying ages and ethnicities, all in the same uniform. They moved with a quiet focus, their expressions serious, professional. When they saw the alien delegation, they would pause, offer a respectful nod, and then continue on their way. There was no fear in their eyes, no hostility, only a quiet, disciplined curiosity. Valerius found it deeply unsettling. He had expected to find a crew of aggressive warriors, eager for a confrontation. Instead, he found a community of calm professionals. It did not align with the violent nature of their ship. The bridge was not what he had expected. Conclave bridges were often grand affairs, designed to inspire awe with sweeping views of the cosmos and elegant control consoles. The human bridge was more of a command center. It was a dark, circular room with no external viewports. The walls were covered in screens displaying streams of data, tactical overlays, and sensor readings. A holographic table stood in the center, currently dormant. The air was thick with the hum of electronics and the low murmur of voices as the bridge crew went about their duties. It felt less like the heart of a starship and more like the nerve center of a fortress under siege. Ambassador Chen led them to the center of the room. Please, he said, gesturing to the space around the holographic table. The answers you seek are not simple. They are tied to the very nature of our understanding of the universe. To explain our ship, I must introduce you to the person who can best articulate its philosophy. She is not a diplomat or a scientist. She is a soldier. He turned as a woman approached from the shadows of a nearby console. She was tall and lean, her uniform crisp, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was sharp, intelligent, and her eyes held a startling intensity. They were the eyes of someone who had seen things the Conclave had never dreamed of. High Arbitrator Imperator Lumina Prime, she said, her voice a low, steady alto that carried easily in the quiet room. My name is Gunnar. Why, Warden Eva Rostova, the ambassador has asked me to explain my ship to you. The title was jarring. Gunnery Warden, a jailer of weapons. Grask straightened, his posture becoming more rigid. This was the warrior he had been expecting. You are the ship's weapons master, he growled. Rostova's gaze met his, unflinching. I am, but my primary duty is not to fire the weapons. It is to ensure they are never needed. I am responsible for the ship's defensive and deterrent systems. I am responsible for its vigilance. She turned to Valerius. You have questions about our vessel, about why it violates your covenants of cosmic temperance. You believe our design is aggressive or primitive. It is neither. It is necessary. She made a gesture, and the holographic table in the center of the room flickered to life. A perfect, three-dimensional image of the vigilance floated in the air before them. "Let us begin with your first rule," Rostova said, her voice taking on a pedagogical tone. "The principle of measured potential. You believe our power core is excessively large, that it holds a dangerous and unnecessary surplus of energy. You are correct about the amount of energy. You are incorrect about its necessity." She manipulated the hologram, zooming in on the ship's core. It was a complex, swirling sphere of plasma and magnetic fields. "This is a standard human fusion core, yes, but its primary output is not directed to propulsion or weapon systems. Over 70% of its energy is dedicated to a single, continuous function, the generation of a reality anchor field." Valeria stared at her. "Reality anchor? The term is unfamiliar." "I suspected it would be," Rostova said. "Your species, all the species of the conclave, you see the void between stars as empty, a vacuum punctuated by gravity wells and radiation. You are, with respect, dangerously mistaken." The hologram shifted. It now showed a representation of empty space, a black canvas dotted with stars. "This is how you see the universe." Then, with another gesture, the image changed. The blackness was no longer empty. It was teeming, crawling with faint, shadowy shapes, with non-Euclidean geometries that writhed just at the edge of perception. It was a horrifying, chaotic sea of things that had no right to exist. "This," Rostova said, her voice dropping to a grave whisper, "is what the universe is actually like." The Lumina Prime pulsed with agitated light. "This is a theoretical model of subspace topology. It is a mathematical abstraction, not a physical reality." "Is it?" Rostova countered. "Our ancestors thought the same thing. They believed that what they could not see could not harm them. They were wrong." She pointed to one of the writhing shapes in the hologram. "We don't have a proper name for them. We call them predatory topologies, non-sentient extra-dimensional phenomena that exist in the quantum foam in the substrate of reality itself. They are not alive in the way we are, but they are hungry. They are drawn to patterns, to order, to stable, predictable, low-energy realities. They feed on causality. A starship moving in a straight line, a planet in a stable orbit, a civilization that broadcasts its existence on neat, orderly frequencies. To them, these things are like a bright, warm light to an insect." A cold dread began to seep into Valerius's mind. He looked at the hologram, at the seething chaos that Rostova claimed was reality, and then thought of the elegant, predictable ships of the conclave, gliding through space on their perfectly calculated routes. "What happens when they feed?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Catastrophic reality failure," Rostova said bluntly. "From the outside, it might look like a ship simply vanishing, or a communications signal suddenly ceasing, or a planet experiencing a sudden, inexplicable geological event that sterilizes its surface. But for those on board or on the planet, it is the dissolution of logic. The laws of physics come undone. Space twists. Time flows backwards. It is an end so complete and so horrifying that it leaves no recognizable trace." The room was utterly silent. Grask, the Cathar Imperator, had taken a step back from the hologram, his warrior's bravado completely gone, replaced by a look of primal fear. Rostova continued, her voice relentless. "Our power core generates a field of high-energy, chaotic spacetime around the ship. The waste heat you detected is not waste. It is a shield. It makes our little bubble of reality indigestible. It presents a constantly shifting, unpredictable, chaotic face to the things that lurk outside. We are not a bright, steady candle in the dark. We are a raging, unpredictable wildfire. They cannot lock onto us. They cannot feed. The energy signature you find so offensive, High Arbitrator, is the price we pay to exist in a universe you do not yet understand. It is the armor that protects this crew. That is why we violate your first rule." "Val," Irius felt his mind reeling. Millennia of established physics of cosmological understanding were being swept away. But the cold logic in Rostova's explanation was undeniable. It explained so much. The ghost signals from the dawn of space travel, the lost colonies, the ships that had simply vanished without a trace. The conclave had always attributed them to navigational errors or unknown stellar phenomena. But what if they had simply been eaten? "Now," Rostova said, her gaze unwavering, "let us discuss your second rule, the sanctity of inertia." The hologram changed again, now showing a conclave vessel executing a graceful FTL jump, its path a clean, predictable arc through spacetime. "Your drives create a stable, temporary wormhole or warp bubble. It is efficient, elegant, and it leaves a clear, traceable signature. It is also, from our perspective, suicidally dangerous." The image changed to show the human drive system. It was not a clean arc. It was a chaotic, instantaneous burst. The ship seemed to dissolve at one point and reappear at another, leaving a fizzing trail of quantum instability in its wake. Our FTL drive does not travel through space, she explained. It briefly unanchors us from our current reality, navigates the chaotic substrate beneath it, and re-anchors us at our destination. The process is violent, unpredictable from the outside, and incredibly complex. But it is essential. To travel in a straight, predictable line through normal space is to paint a target on your hull for every predatory topology in the sector. You are ringing the dinner bell and then announcing the menu. Our method of travel is like a fish darting through a coral reef to avoid a shark. It is not elegant, but it is survival. The quantum instability we leave behind is a feature, not a bug. It further scrambles our trail, making it impossible for them to follow. We violate your second rule because to obey it would be to announce our presence to the true horrors of the void. The Lumina Prime emitted a low, sorrowful chime. You have seen these things, you have proof. Rostova's face hardened, and for a moment Valeria saw a flash of profound grief in her eyes. We have more than proof, we have ghosts. We have a list of 112 colony worlds and thousands of starships from our early expansion era. They followed the straight path. They broadcasted their songs of discovery and hope on clean, orderly frequencies. They are all gone, not conquered, not destroyed, simply erased. We learned our lesson in the graveyards of our own pioneers. We learned that the universe does not reward order and predictability. It punishes it. She looked directly at Grask. And that brings us to your third rule, Imperator, the covenant of silent running. The hologram now showed the chaotic, multi-spectrum emissions pouring from the vigilance. You think this is noise. You think it is a jamming signal meant for you. You are mistaken. This is not a broadcast. It is a disguise. It is a constant, low-level emission of causality-jamming frequencies. It is the technological equivalent of camouflage. It mimics the background radiation of the chaotic substrate. It tells the predators that there is nothing here to eat. It is not a war cry directed at you. It is a whisper to the horrors in the dark, saying, "We are not here, pass us by." The explanation was complete. The room was submerged in a silence so deep it felt like the void itself. The laughter that had echoed in the conclave chamber days ago now seemed like the ignorant braying of fools. They had mocked humanity's engineering, calling it primitive, chaotic, and aggressive. But they had been looking at it all wrong. They were seeing a sword when they should have been seeing a shield. The Vigilance was not a ship of war designed to fight the conclave. It was a ship of survival, built by a species that had stared into the true abyss and had found the courage and ingenuity to build a vessel that could sail its terrifying shores. The humans were not barbarians. They were veterans. They were the hardened survivors of a war the Conclave had never even known was being fought. Grask, the mighty Cathar Imperator, a being who had never shown fear in the face of any physical foe, slowly lowered his head. It was a gesture of profound respect, a warrior's acknowledgement of a greater strength. You have carried this burden alone," he said, his voice stripped of all its earlier aggression, leaving only awe. "We had no choice," Ambassador Chen said softly, speaking for the first time since Rostova had begun. "When we reached for the stars, we did not find the empty, welcoming expanse you did. We found a dark forest filled with hunters we could not see. So we learned to walk silently. We learned to disguise our scent. We built our ships not to conquer, but to endure. The Vigilance is not a weapon. It is a lifeboat." Valerius looked from the grim, resolute face of Warden Rostova to the weary, patient eyes of Ambassador Chen. He thought of the rules, their sacred covenants. They were not pillars of wisdom. They were the fragile walls of a nursery, built by children who had never looked outside the window to see the wolves circling in the night. The human ship was not dangerous because it broke the rules. It was dangerous because it was built for the reality that existed beyond the rules. A reality the Conclave had blissfully ignored for 10,000 years. "We have misjudged you," Valerius said, the admission costing him the entire weight of his civilization's pride. "We have misjudged you profoundly." He looked at the hologram of the seething, chaotic void. "This knowledge, it changes everything." The journey back to the Citadel was made in absolute silence. The harmonious chimes of the Xylo's shuttle now sounded naive, its graceful movements a fool's dance. Valerius felt as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes, revealing a universe infinitely more complex and terrifying than he had ever imagined. The Cathar Imperator, Grask, sat hunched in his armor, the imposing figure of a warrior shattered by a truth far more potent than any weapon. The Lumina Prime was a dim, sorrowful glow, its usual bright confidence extinguished. The revelation delivered by the humans was not merely a matter of technology or strategy, it was a philosophical cataclysm. It recontextualized their entire history, their entire understanding of their place in the cosmos. Every lost ship, every unexplained anomaly was now cast in a sinister new light. They had not been accidents, they had been meals. When Valerius re-entered the grand conclave chamber, the assembled delegates looked at him with 1,000 anxious questions in their varied eyes. He ascended to his dais, the silence of the chamber a heavy, expectant blanket. He did not need to consult his aides or review the data. The truth was burned into his mind. He activated the main communication channel, his voice resonating with a gravity it had never before possessed. "Delegates of the conclave," he began, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces. "For millennia, we have lived by our rules. We believed them to be the ultimate expression of wisdom, the foundation of a lasting peace. We took pride in our order and our predictability. We saw the universe as a grand, logical construct, and we believed that by adhering to logic, we could master it." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We were wrong." He recounted everything he had seen and heard aboard the Vigilance. He spoke of the reality anchor, of the predatory topologies, of the causality jamming field. He did not use the dispassionate language of a report. He used the words of a convert, of a man who had seen a profound and terrible truth. He described the grim professionalism of the human crew, the weary resolve in their eyes. He explained that their technology was not born of aggression, but of a desperate, hard-won survival. As he spoke, the arrogance and suspicion in the chamber slowly evaporated, replaced by a spreading, chilling wave of comprehension. The whispers died. The hostile postures softened. The confident delegates, masters of 1,000 worlds, were reduced to the silence of frightened children hearing a ghost story that they suddenly realized was true. "Humans did not break our rules out of contempt," Valerius concluded, his voice now low and somber. "They broke them because they were operating under a much older, much more fundamental law, the law of survival. We built our society in a walled garden, and we mistook the walls for the edge of the world. The humans were born outside, in the wilderness. They did not laugh at our rules. They looked upon them with pity as the constructs of a people who did not know the true nature of the dark." He looked towards the Cathar delegation. Imperator Grask was right in one respect. The humans are warriors, but their war has not been against us or any other sentient species. Their war has been against the fundamental nature of reality itself, and they have been fighting it alone. The vote was a mere formality. One by one, the species of the conclave cast their holographic ballots. The proposal was not for sanctions or for war. It was for a full, open alliance with the United Nations solar mandate. It was for the sharing of knowledge, for a partnership to face the newly revealed threats of the void. The Cathar were the first to vote in favor, their assent a booming, decisive chime that echoed in the silent chamber. They understood strength, and they recognized it in humanity's grim determination. The Luminians followed, then the Cygnian Veil and all the others. The decision was unanimous. The age of blissful ignorance was over. A new age, an age of vigilance, had begun. In the days that followed, the Citadel was transformed. Human engineers and scientists were welcomed, their starkly functional aesthetics and relentless PR. Agmatism a stark contrast to the Conclave's ancient traditions. Teams of Xylos, Cathar, and Luminians boarded the Vigilance, studying its systems with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The chaotic emissions were no longer seen as an insult, but as a lullaby of safety. The brutalist design was no longer ugly, but a beautiful testament to function and survival. The Conclave had begun the arduous process of retrofitting its own ships, of changing its entire philosophy of star travel. The rules were not abandoned, but amended, infused with the harsh wisdom the humans had brought. Valerius stood once more on the bridge of the Vigilance, this time not as a suspicious delegate, but as an invited guest, a partner. Ambassador Chen stood beside him, and a short distance away, Gunnery Warden Rostova monitored her consoles with the same focused intensity. They were observing the first joint fleet maneuvers, conclave ships attempting to mimic the reality anchoring fields of the human vessels. It was clumsy, inefficient work, but it was a start. "Your people learn quickly," Chen observed, a rare hint of warmth in his voice. "You have embraced a difficult truth with courage." "The truth does not ask for our permission to exist, Ambassador," Valerius replied. "We can only choose whether to face it or be consumed by it. We chose to face it, thanks to you." He looked at the starfield on the main screen, a view that was no longer just a collection of distant suns. It was now a dark forest, and he was finally aware of the things that moved in the shadows. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his being, but it was no longer the paralyzing fear of the unknown. It was the sharp, focused fear of the prepared. It was at that moment that a priority alert chimed through the bridge. A communications officer turned from her console, her face pale. Warden, Ambassador, we're picking something up. It's not local. Deep space, uncharted sector. It's old. Rostova was at the station in an instant, her fingers flying across the controls. Source. Impossible to say. The signal is ancient, degraded. It's been traveling for a very, very long time. It's not a conclave frequency. It's not human. On the main screen, a string of complex data appeared. It was a language, but one so alien, so ancient, that not even the conclave's vast archives had a record of it. But it was not entirely indecipherable. Like the first human message, it was based on universal mathematical principles. A distress call. Our linguistic algorithms are working on it, the officer said, her voice tight with tension. It's a repeating loop, an automated beacon. For several long, tense minutes, the only sound on the bridge was the quiet hum of the ship's systems and the soft clicking of the decryption software. Valerius felt a new kind of dread, a sense that the revelation of the predatory topologies was not the end of the story, but merely the first page. Then the translation appeared on the screen, stark and simple against the blackness of space. The words were few, but their implication was immense, a cosmic bombshell that dwarfed everything they had learned. The silence is a lie. They are not mindless, they learn. They built the patterns, the straight path is their trap. We fought, we broke, do not make our mistake, do not trust the empty. The message ended there, cutting off into static, a final, desperate warning from a civilization so long dead its name was lost to time. Valerius stared at the words, his mind struggling to grasp the terrifying scale of what they implied. The predatory topologies, the things in the dark, they were not just cosmic animals. They were intelligent. They were hunters that set traps. The rules of the conclave, the elegant, predictable paths, the clear communication frequencies, they hadn't just made them vulnerable by accident. They had been following a path laid for them by the predator. They had been happily, willingly, walking into a cage that had been built millions of years before they were even born. He looked at Rostova. The warden's face was grim, but there was no surprise in her eyes, only a deep, chilling confirmation. The silence, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. We always wondered why the galaxy was so quiet, why we never heard anyone else. We assumed we were just the first. You were not the first, Valerius said, the words feeling like dust in his mouth. You were just the first to survive the hunt. He looked out at the starfield again, and this time he did not see a dark forest. He saw a graveyard of countless civilizations that had followed the rules, that had trusted the silence, that had walked the straight and easy path to their own extinction. The laughter of the conclave echoed in his memory, a ghostly, shameful sound. They had laughed at humanity's crooked path, at their chaotic, paranoid designs. They had laughed at the very things that had kept humanity alive. They had laughed at their own ignorance while the shepherds of oblivion watched and waited. The fear was back, colder and deeper than before, but now it was forged with a new, unshakable resolve. The alliance was no longer just a matter of policy or survival. It was a sacred duty, a promise to a galaxy of ghosts that their warning would not be in vain. The age of vigilance had just begun, and humanity, the rule breakers, the pariahs, the survivors, were the only ones who knew the way.